U.S. federal authorities have been tracking Iranian threats against President Trump and other administration officials for years. All of this stemming from Trump's ordering of the 2020 killing of General Soleimani, who had led the forces there. Iran repeatedly has denied plotting to kill Trump, although hardline propaganda footage has suggested Trump was in Tehran's crosshair. Now, as we're taking a live look here from Tehran, still unseen in all of these mornings and the service is Iran's new supreme leader. He is believed to be in hiding after reportedly being wounded in the airstrike that killed his father, and Israel has also threatened to kill him as well. Now, all of this comes as President Trump is set to attend the NATO Summit this week in Turkey, having previously suggested that he might have skipped the upcoming summit entirely were it not being hosted by Turkey's president. Historically, the prime tasks of NATO's top civilian official, who has always been a European and never an American, have been to encourage consensus in an organization that makes its decisions unanimously and to speak on behalf of all 32 member countries. Now, Trump has repeatedly said that he remains disappointed at some NATO allies who have refused to join the Iran war when he had launched alongside Israel. He has said this, quote, "We don't need their money. We don't need anything. I just want loyalty." To talk more on all of this, I do want to bring in Fellow for American Strategy with JINSA, Jonathan Ruhe, back onto the program. And Jonathan, we appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
So I wanted to, draw the attention to this live look right here from Tehran as we continue to see people there in the streets to mourn the passing of the late leader. But what's so interesting is to this day, we still haven't seen the late Supreme Leader's son, now the new Supreme Leader. We also even haven't heard his voice as of yet. What do you make of the new Supreme Leader not attending these prayer services for his father?
So, I think like we heard at the outset with the clip, I think the general assessment is that he was gravely wounded in the airstrikes that killed his father, the former Supreme Leader, at the outset of this war, late February, early March. I think right now for the regime in Iran writ large, which includes not only the new Supreme Leader, but a lot of these other officials that we've seen, including in the U.S. negotiations, a lot of them are IRGC military. For them, it's sort of, the symbol or the mythology of what the Supreme Leader represents, specifically one who is the son of the former Supreme Leader, is meant to send a signal both to Iranians at home and to the world abroad that this regime has continuity and resilience and survival, and that the war with the United States did not break apart the regime or severely weaken it. And so I think in that sense, while it's very telling that Mojtaba, the new Supreme Leader, is not heard of or seen and is believed to be in hiding, so potential he may be dead, but ultimately that matters less than what he represents for this regime. And we're seeing this play out with the funeral celebrations.
As we take a look at the regime, and you were talking the importance, at least for Iran, about just showcasing, presenting continuity, regardless of what's happening behind the scenes. As we take a look at who's making these decisions, who is mapping out the strategy right now, is it the IRGC? Are they truly the entity in power?
So I think they are the entity in power insofar as Iran, this victory for Iran, as the regime wants to portray it at least, is a military victory. They stood up to the world's greatest superpower, the great Satan in their own terminology, a country that they admit is militarily superior, has more firepower. But Iran wants to show that it's their missiles and drones and things like that that enabled this victory. So the IRGC is a even more overt, shall we say, key player in the Iranian regime now than they were even before the war. They're also the key player in Iran's economy. And while the new official leadership is still sort of coalescing and figuring out who exactly is in charge, because it's a combination of the new Supreme Leader, other clerics, but also a lot of these military and other officials, it's sort of an informal collective leadership. at this point. But I think the important thing is that ultimately nothing's going to get done over a veto from the IRGC, and that includes signing a deal with the United States or even going back to war.
I want to go back to this. President Trump saying that he was giving Iran the week off for this funeral service. This comes amid the ongoing talks between the United States and Iran, trying to come to some sort of permanent agreement as we take a look ahead. There continue to be sticking points, including the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's nuclear capability. Iran has shown in the history that it really cannot be trusted, that it may say something but not follow it with actions. So with this little to no trust between the United States and Iran, what does it look like in terms of coming to some sort of permanent agreement? Is that realistic?
So it becomes more realistic if, from an American perspective, you're willing to agree to a very poor agreement, because ultimately the one thing that the current Iranian regime, the current leadership, has in common with the previous supreme leader, now dead, is they believe they already agreed to a deal with the United States. It was called the JCPOA under President Obama. And the reason the regime agreed to that deal is because they thought that was the final deal. And they agreed to it because they got billions and billions of dollars in sanctions relief in exchange for merely temporary, limited, and, as we've seen, easily reversible constraints on their nuclear weapons program. So right now, they may be willing to agree to something that's basically the JCPOA 2.0, especially if they can get billions more in sanctions relief, which they desperately need to restabilize the economy that they've destroyed inside Iran, but also to rebuild their military. And so, for the United States, from that perspective, it's a very unfavorable deal. But more directly to your question about trust, Iran had that deal. The JCPOA is incredibly one-sided in their favor, and they still cheated on it. They lied about their past efforts to build a bomb, and they've continued to do that ever since, even as they claim the high ground that they were the aggrieved party when Trump left the deal. So I see nothing to heal that breach of trust. That's part of what the Iranian regime does. Lying to the United States is part of their fabric. It's how they justify their right to rule. And it's what they'll continue to do in these negotiations. And even if they sign or agree to a permanent deal that supposedly requires them to come clean on this stuff.
Jonathan, as we take a look ahead, President Trump has, repeatedly reiterated that he wants peace, but he is also just as determined not to allow Iran to have nuclear capability. As we take a look at the strategy from the United States, where does that leave the United States in terms of options?
So it is a tough spot at this point. I think President Trump sought out these negotiations since the ceasefire, and we've gotten this initial MOU between the United States and Iran. I believe he sought that out because for all the operational success of Operation Epic Fury against the Iranian regime on a military level, ultimately, I think Trump realized that it was diminishing returns the longer that war went on, especially because Iran has shown in retaliation that they can really impose a cost on the region and the global economy. And so, I think while Trump may be trying diplomacy to see on the off chance that there's a good deal to be had, I think as I was just arguing, there is not a good deal on the table in any sense of the term for the United States. And so the tough decision now is, do you sort of exist with this status quo, which I think favors Iran? Do you try to convince the Iranians you're willing to go back to war, either because that's what's needed to rectify the military situation, especially with the Strait of Hormuz, which you mentioned, or even to try to convince the Iranians to negotiate in earnest, in good faith, really for the first time ever? That's a very tough set of strategic decisions that the president now faces. And one, I think that, at the very least, diplomacy is the worst of those options for everything we've discussed.
That has yet to be determined. I do want to now shift to what's coming ahead this week, which is President Trump attending the NATO Summit. He had originally indicated that he might have even skipped out had the Turkey's president not been part of it. And there's been a lot of frustration on President Trump's side, stating that he would like the European allies to do more and support the United States more in this effort. He doesn't view this as a U.S. only issue. It's a global issue, international security. And I have to imagine Iran's going to be one of the major topics discussed. What do those discussions look like? Can there be a greater support from NATO when it comes to Iran as part of this strategy?
Yes, so I think those discussions ultimately will hinge around the Strait of Hormuz and restoring freedom of navigation in this critical waterway. The Europeans, I think, to be fair to them, were caught off guard by Trump's demands that they come and help once Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz, which frankly was something the Trump administration should have foreseen in going to war. And it seems rather apparent that they did not really plan for that. And so Iran gained the upper hand there. So while I think the Europeans are sort of wondering what the strategy is here, at the same time, those same NATO countries in Europe have a lot of the capabilities they're needed to clear the strait of mines and other things, and to escort a lot of the ships out of the region. So I think we're going to see a lot of tough discussions, hopefully constructive ones, in this upcoming summit. Ways for the Europeans to get on board. The real sort of sticking point here is, the Europeans, they have these good minesweeping other capabilities. They also, by and large, have fairly capable navies, not what they used to be, but nevertheless, the Europeans have made, I think, way too clear on a public level, they're not going to go help out unless there's a peace deal in place, because they are sort of advertising how afraid they are of being shot at by the Iranians. And so Iran, just exploits this. They're going to try to, I think we'll see messaging go up the next week, where the Iranians keep threatening to shoot anything that moves in the strait that doesn't pay off the Iranians, precisely because they want to create a situation where Trump and the Europeans are sort of, at daggers drawn with one another in this summit. And so I think there's a more diplomatic way, especially behind the scenes, to hash out some of these real difficulties, because the Europeans do have a role and should play a role in reopening the strait, because ultimately they're as dependent on the free flow of navigation there as anyone else.
Yes, and I did also want to share this. This is from Fox and Friends right here, saying that the NATO summit is set to begin in Turkey this week, with President Trump expected to attend and also possibly meet with President Netanyahu soon. And I also wanted to bring in Israel to this, one of the U.S.'s biggest allies, and they worked in tandem at the very onset of what's been going on in the Middle East. We have seen some division, some fractures between the relationship between Israel and the United States, at least in terms of rhetoric and, philosophy in terms of how to move forward with this strategy. Where does this relationship stand, and what is that path forward?
So, part of my response, I would just cut and paste it from what I just said in the previous answer, which is, there's plenty of precedent for U.S. and Israeli political leadership to have tensions with one another. We've seen it basically with almost every president and every Israeli prime minister. That's perfectly natural, even for countries that are as close and have cooperated as well as the United States and Israel. But again, it's the sort of hashing this out in public, airing grievances more for public consumption than for the direct intended audience on the other side of the relationship. That's counterproductive. Again, Iran is happy to exploit that daylight, as we call it. We're seeing that play out in Lebanon, where clearly there have been policy differences between the United States and Israel over what to do with Hezbollah and Iran. We've seen Iran exploit that very well and effectively convince the United States to publicly and openly try to sideline Israel or prevent Israel from dealing with the Hezbollah problem there. But going forward, part of this is have these discussions in private. They need to be had, especially when the stakes are so high. But going forward, ultimately what you can do is build off of this incredible cooperation that you mentioned between the United States and Israel on a military level. It's the closest U.S. cooperation on that level we've had with anyone since Britain and Australia in World War II, frankly. And so that's an incredible opportunity to going forward, both in terms of how to continue dealing with Iranian threats, but also in this larger context of the United States and Israel are thinking, how do we take our partnership forward in the next generation? Joint research and development, joint production of weapons systems, intelligence sharing, things like that. So in that larger context and all the mutual benefits that are possible, treat these current disagreements as a speed bump and do so behind closed doors.
Jonathan Ruhe with JINSA, as always, we appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.